In 1932, a woman in East Harlem fed 9 people on 11 cents. She did it with a pot of water, a handful of stale bread, and a single egg. No recipe book, no government pamphlet, just a survival instinct carried across the Atlantic in a cardboard suitcase. That dish, number 7 on this list, is now being studied by food historians who say it contains more nutritional logic than most modern meal plans. And number 3 involves a technique so simple that Depression-era Italian mothers kept it secret from their own neighbors out of shame. Turns out, it was genius. These 25 meals were never written down in cookbooks. They lived in the hands of women who could not read English, who bartered with pushcart vendors on Mulberry Street, and who turned poverty into plates that held families together when everything else was falling apart. The American food industry spent the next 50 years teaching us to forget them, because if you knew how to cook like an Italian immigrant grandmother in 1934, you would never buy another box of Hamburger Helper in your life. Before we start, hit the subscribe button, because what you are about to learn is a piece of American history that almost disappeared forever. Number 25, bread and oil. Before it became a trendy appetizer at Olive Garden, bread and oil was Tuesday night dinner for a family of 7 in a Brooklyn tenement. Stale bread, sometimes 2 or 3 days old, was drizzled with whatever olive oil the family could afford. A clove of garlic was rubbed across the crust. A pinch of salt, if they had it. That was the meal. In 1933, a loaf of Italian bread cost about 5 cents at the neighborhood bakery. Olive oil was the one luxury Italian families refused to surrender, even when it meant skipping meat for a month. Mothers poured it carefully, almost reverently, knowing that fat was what kept children from getting sick. Kids ate it standing in the kitchen, fingers shiny with grease. Nobody sat down for bread and oil. It was too humble for ceremony. Today, restaurants charge $14 for the same thing and call it bruschetta. Number 24, pasta e fagioli. Every Italian immigrant neighborhood knew this dish by a different name. Pasta fazool in New York, pasta and beans in Philadelphia. Whatever you called it, it was the same thing. A thick, starchy soup of cannellini beans, broken pasta, garlic, and tomato. A pound of dried beans cost about 4 cents in 1931. A box of ditalini cost another nickel. Together, you could feed an entire family for under 15 cents. The trick was cooking the pasta directly in the bean broth, so the starch thickened everything into a porridge that stuck to your ribs for hours. Children came home from school and ladled their own bowls without asking. The soup was always there. Nutritionists now point out that beans and pasta together form a complete protein. Italian grandmothers did not know the science. They just knew their kids were not hungry. Number 23, dandelion greens. When there was no money for vegetables, Italian mothers sent their children to vacant lots and railroad embankments to pick dandelion greens. Free food, growing wild in every city in America. The bitter leaves were sautéed in garlic and olive oil, sometimes with a scatter of red pepper flakes, and served over bread or alongside whatever else the kitchen could produce. In Italian neighborhoods, from Boston to San Francisco, you could spot immigrant families bent over patches of weeds that their American neighbors sprayed with poison. Children remember being teased at school for eating weeds. Those dandelion greens contained more iron, calcium, and vitamin A than the iceberg lettuce the rest of America was eating. Mothers knew the bitterness meant strength. Served with a squeeze of lemon and a crust of bread, dandelion greens kept families nourished when the grocery budget hit zero. Number 22, polenta. In northern Italian immigrant households, polenta replaced bread as the foundation of every meal. Cornmeal cost almost nothing, about 3 cents a pound, and a single pound could feed a family of 5. Mothers stirred the pot for 30 to 40 minutes without stopping, the thick golden porridge bubbling and spitting, requiring constant attention to prevent lumps. Fresh from the pot, polenta was soft and creamy, eaten with a drizzle of oil or a spoonful of tomato sauce. But the real trick came the next day. Leftover polenta was poured onto a board, cooled until firm, then sliced and fried in a hot pan until golden and crispy on both sides. Fried polenta became breakfast, lunch, and the base for any scrap of meat or cheese the family could find. Some mothers topped it with a fried egg on paydays. Most days, it was eaten plain with salt. Number 21. Escarole and beans. A head of escarole cost 2 or 3 cents at the pushcart market. Combined with white beans and garlic, it became a one-pot meal that tasted far richer than its ingredients suggested. Mothers wilted the escarole in olive oil with sliced garlic until it collapsed into a silky heap, then stirred in cooked cannellini beans and enough broth to make it soupy. A heel of Parmesan rind, saved for weeks and kept wrapped in cloth, went into the pot to add depth. That rind trick was an open secret in Italian kitchens. Nothing with flavor got thrown away. The combination of greens and beans provided fiber, protein, protein and iron in a single bowl. Children sopped up the broth with bread, tilting their bowls to catch every last drop. Number 20. Pepper and egg sandwiches. On Fridays, when Catholic families abstained from meat, the pepper and egg sandwich ruled Italian-American kitchens. Green bell peppers, sliced thin, were fried slowly in olive oil until completely soft and sweet. Then beaten eggs were poured over the peppers and scrambled together into a tender, oily heap, stuffed into a split Italian roll. The whole sandwich cost maybe 7 cents. The smell of peppers and eggs in olive oil was so distinctive that neighbors knew what day of the week it was just by opening their windows. Children carried these sandwiches to school wrapped in wax paper. The Italian kids could always be identified in the lunchroom by the oil stains on the bag. No meat, no cheese, just peppers, eggs, bread, and enough flavor to make you forget you were poor. Number 19. Lentil soup. A bag of dried lentils was the cheapest protein in America during the Depression. 5 cents bought enough to make a pot of soup that lasted 3 days. Italian mothers simmered lentils with diced carrots, celery, onion, garlic, and a piece of salt pork or a ham bone if the family was lucky. Unlike other dried beans, lentils needed no soaking. They cooked soft in under an hour, making them the fastest hot meal a mother could produce. The soup was thick, almost stew-like, and filling enough that children fell asleep at the table after eating. On New Year's Eve, lentil soup carried special meaning. The small, round legumes symbolized coins, and eating them promised prosperity in the coming year. Sometimes it came true, often it did not, but the soup was always there. Number 18. Aglio e olio. 3 ingredients: garlic, olive oil, and spaghetti. That was dinner. Mothers heated olive oil in a pan, sliced garlic paper thin, and fried it until golden but never brown. Burned garlic meant a ruined meal, and there was no money to start over. The cooked spaghetti was tossed directly into the garlic oil with a ladle full of pasta water, and the starch turned everything into a glossy, silky sauce that clung to every strand. A pinch of red pepper flakes, if the family kept them. The entire dish cost less than a dime and was ready in 15 minutes. It was the meal of last resort, the dish that appeared when every other option had been exhausted. And yet, it was delicious. So delicious that fine dining restaurants now charge $18 for the same plate and pretend they invented simplicity. First pattern break. Here is something nobody tells you about Depression-era Italian cooking. The combination of olive oil, garlic, beans, and greens that shows up in nearly every dish on this list is now recognized by medical researchers as the foundation of the Mediterranean diet, the same eating pattern that reduces heart disease, diabetes, and early death. These women were not following a diet. They were surviving. And survival, it turns out, looks a lot like health when you remove the processed foods that came later. Number 17. Egg drop soup, Italian style. Stracciatella. When a mother had 1 AGG in a pot of broth, she made stracciatella. The broth could be anything: water simmered with a Parmesan rind, chicken bones saved from Sunday, or just salted water with a bit of spinach. She would beat a single egg with a fork, sometimes stirring in a spoonful of grated cheese, then drizzle it slowly into the simmering broth while stirring. The egg formed delicate ribbons, stretching and curling through the liquid, turning plain broth into something that looked and tasted like a real meal. 1 egg. That was the difference between water and dinner. The technique required patience. Pour too fast, and the egg clumped. Stir too hard, and the ribbons disappeared. Italian families grew cardoons in backyard gardens across the Northeast. Cardoons are a thistle-like vegetable that their American neighbors did not recognize and would not touch. The stalks were peeled and boiled until tender, dipped in beaten egg and breadcrumbs, then fried in oil until golden. The taste was similar to artichoke hearts, nutty and slightly bitter, wrapped in a crispy shell. A single plant produced enough stalks for multiple meals, and the seeds cost nothing once a family had an established plant. American grocery stores never stocked them. Seed catalogs ignored them, and within 2 generations, the knowledge of how to grow and cook cardoons nearly vanished from Italian-American kitchens. The gardens were paved over for driveways, and the children who once helped peel the stalks forgot the taste entirely. Number 15. Pasta with breadcrumbs. Pasta ca mudica. In Sicily, they called it the poor man's Parmesan. When cheese was too expensive, which was most of the time, mothers toasted stale breadcrumbs in olive oil until they turned golden and crunchy, then tossed them with hot pasta. The breadcrumbs mimicked the texture and saltiness of grated cheese so convincingly that children sometimes could not tell the difference. Stale bread cost nothing. Turning it into a pasta topping was the kind of alchemy that defined Depression-era Italian cooking. Some mothers added anchovies or sardines for extra flavor. Others kept it simple, just crumbs, oil, garlic, and salt. There was no shame in breadcrumbs. There was only shame in an empty plate. Number 14. Stuffed artichokes. When artichokes appeared at the pushcart markets in spring, Italian mothers bought them by the armful. The tough outer leaves were pulled back, and the spaces stuffed with a mixture of breadcrumbs, garlic, Parmesan, parsley, and olive oil. Then the whole artichoke was set upright in a pot with an inch of water and steamed until tender. Pulling each leaf and scraping the stuffing with your teeth was a ritual that slowed the meal down, making a single artichoke feel like a feast that lasted an hour. Children competed to reach the heart first, that tender prize hidden beneath the fuzzy choke. At 10 cents each in season, artichokes were affordable enough for a weekly treat, but special enough to feel like celebration. Number 13. Zucchini fritters. When the backyard garden exploded with zucchini in August, as every garden inevitably did, mothers grated the squash, squeezed out the water, mixed it with egg, flour, garlic, and a handful of Parmesan, then fried spoonfuls in hot oil until crispy and golden. A single zucchini produced enough fritters for the whole family. 3 zucchini, and nobody went to bed hungry. The fritters were eaten hot, straight from the pan, the edges lacy and crunchy, while the center stayed soft and almost creamy. Children fought over the crispiest ones. Mothers ate last, standing at the stove, frying the final batch after everyone else had been served. Some mothers made them savory. Others added a spoonful of sugar and served them as dessert. Either way, the zucchini disappeared and the family was fed. Second pattern break. Notice the pattern here. Almost every dish on this list uses the same handful of ingredients: olive oil, garlic, bread, eggs, beans, and whatever grew in the garden. Italian immigrant women did not have variety, they had technique. The same 5 ingredients became 25 different meals because these women understood heat, timing, and texture in ways that modern cooks with full pantries do not. Number 12. Pasta with potatoes. Pasta e patate. This was the dish that confused American neighbors. Starch on starch, pasta and potatoes in the same pot. But Italian mothers knew that cooking cubed potatoes directly in the pasta water created a thick, creamy broth that clung to every piece of ditalini like a sauce. The potatoes broke down partially and thickened the liquid, while some cubes held their shape. A drizzle of olive oil, a clove of garlic, and sometimes a piece of salt pork rind transformed what looked like desperation into something velvety and deeply satisfying. The dish cost almost nothing and stuck to your ribs for hours. Mothers served it thick enough to eat with a fork, not a spoon, a mark of pride that meant the proportions were correct. Number 11. Cardoon soup in broth. For Easter and Christmas, Italian families prepared a rich broth from chicken or beef bones and floated pieces of battered and fried cardoon in it, alongside tiny meatballs the size of marbles and shreds of beaten egg. The soup was a celebration, but its origins were pure Depression-era economy. Bones were free, or nearly free, from the butcher. A single egg stretched into ribbons and meatballs that made the broth feel abundant. The fried cardoon added texture, turning thin broth into a layered, complex bowl. Families who could not afford a roast made this soup the centerpiece of holiday meals, and nobody at the table felt deprived. Holiday cooking in a Depression-era Italian kitchen was not about abundance. It was about making scarcity invisible. Number 10. Potato croquettes. Leftover mashed potatoes were never thrown away. Mothers mixed them with egg, Parmesan, parsley, and a pinch of salt, then rolled the mixture into small cylinders, breaded them, and fried them until the outside shattered at the first bite and the inside stayed creamy and hot. Some mothers tucked a small cube of mozzarella inside each one, a hidden surprise that stretched and pulled when the croquette was broken open. Children lived for that moment. The cost was negligible. Potatoes, an egg, stale bread for crumbs. But the result felt luxurious. A golden, crunchy, cheesy bite that made poverty taste like a party. Number 9. Greens pie. Pizza di scarola. A pie crust made from the simplest dough, flour, water, olive oil, and a pinch of salt was filled with sautéed escarole, olives, capers, raisins, pine nuts, and garlic, then baked until golden. The combination of sweet raisins and salty olives against the bitter greens created a flavor far more complex than its cheap ingredients suggested. Mothers made these pies for Christmas Eve, but during the Depression, they appeared whenever the garden produced more greens than the family could eat. A single PIE could serve 8 people, and the sturdy crust meant it traveled well, carried to work sites and schoolyards wrapped in cloth. Leftovers were eaten cold for breakfast, the flavors deepening overnight. Number 8. Frittata. The Italian frittata was the ultimate poverty meal dressed in dignity. Whatever was in the kitchen went into a beaten egg mixture and was cooked slowly in a heavy pan until set. Leftover pasta, stale bread, a handful of greens, a few slices of onion, anything worked. The eggs bound everything together into a golden, tender cake that could be eaten hot, warm, or cold. Sliced into wedges, a frittata fed 4 people for the cost of 3 eggs and whatever scraps the icebox offered. Mothers made frittatas on Saturday nights to use up the week's leftovers before the Sunday market. Nothing was wasted. The crispy bottom was considered the best part, and flipping it without breaking it was a skill that separated experienced cooks from beginners. Some mothers used a plate. Others tossed it in the air. Children watched with held breath every single time. Number 7. Pancotto, bread soup. This was the 11-cent miracle. Stale bread torn into pieces was dropped into boiling water or broth and simmered until it dissolved into a thick, porridge-like soup. A single egg was beaten and stirred in at the end, forming ribbons through the bread. Garlic, olive oil, and whatever green herb was available finished the dish. It was the meal of absolute last resort, the dish that appeared when the cupboard held nothing but bread too hard to chew and an egg too precious to fry alone. Here is what food historians discovered. Pancotto delivers complex carbohydrates, protein from the egg, healthy fats from the olive oil, and the slow-releasing energy of cooked bread starch. It was, accidentally, a nearly perfect recovery food. Mothers who made pancotto were feeding sick children and exhausted laborers with a dish their bodies could absorb easily and completely. Poverty invented what sports nutritionists now charge money to recommend. Number 6. Bacala, salt cod. Italian immigrants bought dried salt cod from barrels in neighborhood shops, paying 10 to 15 cents a pound for a protein that lasted months without refrigeration. The stiff, pungent planks of fish had to be soaked in cold water for 2 or 3 days, with the water changed every 8 hours before the cod became soft enough to cook. Once rehydrated, it was fried, stewed with tomatoes, or baked with potatoes and olives. The smell of soaking bacala announced itself through tenement walls, and American neighbors complained regularly. But for Italian families, bacala was sacred. It appeared on Christmas Eve as the centerpiece of the Feast of the Seven Fishes, and during the Depression it appeared whenever meat was unaffordable. A single pound, once rehydrated, doubled in weight and could feed a family of 6. Third, pattern break. Here is the truth that American food companies worked hard to bury. Every single dish on this list costs less to make today, adjusted for inflation, than the processed frozen meals that replaced them. A box of frozen lasagna costs $8. Pasta e fagioli costs about $1.50. The food industry did not sell us convenience, they sold us forgetfulness. On the rare Sundays when a family could afford meat, a thin, cheap cut of beef was pounded flat, spread with garlic, parsley, parmesan, and breadcrumbs, then rolled and tied with string before being browned and simmered in tomato sauce for hours. The braciole flavored the entire pot of gravy, the meat juices enriching every drop. A single braciole the size of a man's hand could flavor a pot of gravy big enough to dress pasta for 10 people. The meat was sliced and served as a second course after the pasta, stretching a 20-cent piece of beef into 2 separate meals within the same sitting. Mothers who made braciole on Sundays were performing a kind of theater, transforming poverty into ceremony. Number 4. Rapini with sausage. When a family could afford a single link of Italian sausage, it was sliced thin and fried with broccoli rabe, the bitter green that Italian immigrants grew in every available patch of dirt. The sausage fat rendered into the pan, coating the greens and turning their bitterness into something rich and savory. A clove of garlic, a pinch of red pepper, and the dish was done. Piled on bread or served alongside polenta, a single sausage and a bunch of rapini fed 4 people comfortably. The genius was in the ratio. Just enough meat to flavor the greens, never enough to be the star. Italian mothers understood that a little pork fat went further than a lot of lean anything. Number 3, pasta with sardines. Here is the dish that mothers kept quiet about. A tin of sardines cost 5 cents. A box of spaghetti cost a nickel. Together, with garlic, olive oil, breadcrumbs, and a handful of fennel if it grew wild nearby, they produced a Sicilian classic that tasted like the sea and the hillside at the same time. Mothers mashed the sardines into the oil, letting them dissolve into a savory paste that coated every strand of pasta. The toasted breadcrumbs on top gave it crunch. But sardines meant poor. They meant immigrant. Children begged mothers not to send sardine sandwiches to school. The smell marked you. So this dish was eaten at home, with the windows closed, and never discussed outside the kitchen. Here is what makes it genius. Sardines are one of the most nutrient-dense foods on Earth, rich in omega-3 fatty acids, calcium from the soft bones, vitamin D, and protein. A 5-cent tin delivered more nutrition than $1's worth of beef. The mothers who served this dish in secret were feeding their families better than their wealthier American neighbors, and they never knew it. Number 2, minestrone. The Italian immigrant minestrone was not the thin, polite soup that comes in a Campbell's can. It was a thick, aggressive stew of whatever the kitchen had, simmered until the beans burst and the vegetables melted into a broth so dense a spoon could nearly stand in it. Kidney beans, zucchini, potatoes, carrots, cabbage, celery, onion, garlic, a Parmesan rind, and broken pasta all went into the same pot. The recipe changed with every season and every paycheck. The pot was never made small. It fed the family for 3 days, and everyone agreed it tasted better on the second day. Mothers ladled it over stale bread, stretching the soup further and softening the bread into something almost custardy. A pot cost roughly 20 cents and produced 15 to 20 servings. No other dish on this list matched that economy. Number 1, Sunday gravy. Every Italian immigrant family in America organized the entire week around one meal, Sunday gravy. A massive pot of tomato sauce, enriched with whatever meat the family could afford, simmered from early morning until the apartment smelled like a church of garlic and basil. Pork ribs, meatballs, braciole, sausage links. If the family had money, all 4 went into the pot. During the Depression, it might be just one lonely meatball and a pork bone. It did not matter. The sauce was the point. The pasta was dressed with the gravy as the first course. Then the meats were pulled from the pot and served as the second course. 2 meals from one pot. Children remember the sound of the sauce bubbling, the sight of their mother stirring at 7 in the morning while the rest of the house still slept. Sunday gravy was not about food. It was about identity. Italian. Together. Unbroken. That pot held the entire reason they came to America in the first place. Try one of these this week. Pasta e fagioli, aglio e olio, bread soup. Pick the one that matches what is already sitting in your kitchen. Then, tell me in the comments if your grandmother was just being sentimental or if she actually knew something the food industry spent billions making us forget. Share which one you are going to try. I already know the answer. My kitchen smells like Sunday gravy right now, and I am never going back.